From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health. And now here is our host and producer, Hilda Labrada Gore.
Hey, Hilda here. What if you were convinced that avoiding meat was best for the planet and best for your health? You became vegan, and then over time you decided to leave that dietary approach and lifestyle behind. And then word got out that you made that shift and you started to receive hatred online and in person. Would you back down? Would you succumb to the pressure and go back to your previous philosophy? Or would you stand by your newfound convictions? This is episode 514, and our guest today is Mollie Engelhart. Mollie is a former vegan chef who went through all of what I just described. She had a restaurant in California known as Kind Sage, and she switched it over because she started to include meat on the menu. And she got so much hate and vitriol in person from protesters and online, people maligning her reputation. But Mollie decided to stand strong against the haters. And even though her restaurant called Sage, a Regenerative Kitchen, has now closed, she is still a firm advocate of regenerative farming and health freedom. As a matter of fact, she has 2 regenerative farms now, and she even hosts events focused on health freedom, common law, and natural medicine. Today, Mollie shares her remarkable story and how she chose to stand by her convictions, the importance of regenerative meat, raw milk, and food sovereignty. Before we get into the conversation, I want to ask you, do you want to grow your own food, preserve your own harvest, and say goodbye to the grocery store? The Gubba Homestead podcast is your ultimate guide. Gubba dives into everything from making homemade butter to preparing for emergencies with a focus on sustainability and self-reliance. It's a wonderful podcast with a modern twist on old school wisdom, and she offers down-to-earth advice with a touch of humor. I think Gubba is fascinating and funny as she empowers you to roll up your sleeves and get started homesteading. You can find the Gubba Homestead podcast on the podcast platform of your choice or on her website, gubbahomestead.com. I'm telling you, you will be inspired to start your own homesteading journey. I think you'll love it. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Mollie.
Thank you so much for having me. We rescheduled, and so we're so happy to actually be here. We were going to do it in June and got it.
I know, and I was actually going to meet you at your restaurant. This is what we have to kick things off with. You had a vegan restaurant for 13 years, and then you changed it. Why did you change it, and what's happening now?
Yeah, my story is the story of a vegan chef in Los Angeles turned cattle rancher in Texas. That is my story. And I started my journey with regenerative agriculture back in 2013. I heard a Graham Sate podcast, and it just blew my mind. That everything made sense. Carbon's not the evils that we've been made to see, and we're all made of carbon, and carbon is cycling. Methane is far worse than carbon, and food waste is the main. And everything he said made sense. Poof. And I'm a vegan chef in Los Angeles, tons of food waste going into the landfill from my restaurants at this time. There's no composting in LA. So I want to get a farm, and I want to compost my own compost. And I'm going to have this vegan farm. It's going to be amazing, and nothing's ever going to die. And so I worked super hard, saved money, tried to convince other people to buy a farm, realized I'm the one I'm waiting for, bought this piece of land, fallow land, and completely brought it back from 0.01% organic matter to 20% organic matter in 5 years.
20%, that's huge.
Huge. It's huge. And granted, we had tons of food waste coming out of the restaurants that we were able to make into compost and apply to the ground. So that's how we got there. And in my journey of regenerative agriculture and in my journey of soil and watching my health and my family's health, living closer to nature and soil, everything I believed as a vegan started to not make sense. So, I've been raised vegetarian. My mom just did butter because she didn't believe in seed oil. She was way ahead of the game on the seed oils. And so she did butter and then everything else vegan because she didn't want to contribute to animal agriculture in the way that it was. And so I was just kind of raised in that vegetarian world, and that was normal for me. But then I saw videos and it's like, you're going to get cancer if you eat dairy, and you're going to get cancer if you eat red meat, or whatever that was in the atmosphere. So I held those to be true and I believed them. And then I'm like breastfeeding my baby, and I'm looking at my cow who just calved, Una, and her cow is favoring 2/4 of her udder. And so we're milking off 2/4 of her udder so she doesn't get mastitis. And then my kid is drinking oat milk from Costco in a Tetra Pak that's never going to break down. And I'm breastfeeding my littler one. And I'm thinking to myself, why is my breast milk gold and like perfect immunity for this area and everything? But my cow, who's living in a dirtier environment in this same area, so fighting all the same pathogens and more, why is my cow's milk going to cause cancer and my milk is gold? Like, that does not make any sense. So then I thought, wait, no, raw milk. So pasteurized milk, yeah, no, I get it. It kills everything. That's not good. But raw milk, how could raw milk be bad for you? I just think it couldn't make any kind of sense. And I'm like learning everything about the microbiology in the soil. So I look up the microbiology in raw milk, and it's like 94% compatible with the human gut. And I'm going, well, this can't be bad. And so I start feeding my kid raw milk, and then we're eating eggs from our chickens. And so this just went little by little, but my restaurants were just exploding, $7 million a year per store, just doing amazing. So it was scary. So everybody's saying right now that I made this change for money. The truth is I kept them vegan. If we're going to be really honest, if I did something for the money, I kept them vegan for the money. But I had a deal with a big venture capital firm for $25 million in 2019, and the end of 2019, going into 2020, we're doing the due diligence, and the payout will be between 25 and 31 million, depending on certain markers. And so it doesn't make sense for me to change the concept. I'm going to get out and I can do my regenerative farming thing. I can be free to not be hiding the raw milk in my refrigerator. And I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And then the pandemic hits. And the venture capital goes away, and and my restaurants are now just like losing money, just bleeding $50,000 a month rent and $40,000 a month rent and 4 stores and a cloud kitchen. And I'm just bleeding money, and I'm pivoting. And I'm like, well, this does not seem like the time to add meat and dairy to the menu. Also, everything's to go. Remember, people live in different places. So just to remind people what the Los Angeles program was, it was no indoor dining for the better part of 2+ years. There was a few moments that they let us have indoor dining, like a moment, and then no more. And then there was also many, many months with not even outdoor dining. Outdoor dining was too dangerous. This invisible virus was going to kill you on the street while you were eating. So ridiculous. So that was not the time to try to go only. I'm going to try to like communicate what regenerative agriculture is and why this is all important. And then we're coming out of the pandemic, and I've lost 2 out of my 5, like 2 full restaurants, and I'm down to like 1 cloud kitchen and 2 restaurants. And I'm thinking of just closing everything. I'm still losing $1 million a year. I've lost all my savings. I've sold everything, trying to keep everybody employed through the pandemic. And I think, you know what? What's true to me and true to my heart is that regenerative agriculture is the path forward for humanity. And so I'm going to make an announcement on Earth Day, and I'm going to tell the world that I made a mistake. I was raised and indoctrinated into eating less meat and dairy is healthier, and that eating less meat and dairy is the pathway forward. But when I started growing my own food, I realized you cannot grow enough food to feed your family, just fruits and vegetables, if you don't live like super close to the equator where you can grow 365 days a year and basically be like a fruitarian. But otherwise, it's super hard to get enough calories.
So you decided to tell the world, and I don't know what you expected, but you were not received with the arms wide open.
I expected to lose about 20% of my customers, and I expected to gain a bunch of the Weston A. Price and the I'm a carnivore and I want to only eat no poison. And I thought that the mob of mothers that awakened during the pandemic to say, like, enough is enough. I thought that I would get a wave of those women that wanted a raw milk latte, that wanted to get A2 raw Gouda on their venison patty melt with kimchi on long fermented sourdough bread. I thought that crowd was going to bum rush me and I was going to lose the vegans and that there'd be a hard transition, but it would be fine. It would be like a wave, like,
yeah.
Yeah, we haven't gone on the up part of the wave yet. We're just still on the down part of the wave.
But let's go back to that venison melt for a second. So I have been to your Regenerative Kitchen restaurant, and I've been to 2 of the locations actually in California, and they are to live for, I like to say.
Yes,
like the food is so good. The fries are done in the tallow and I had some like Oaxacan flautas one time when I was there, or some kind of.
We grew that corn ourselves on our farm. My husband's Oaxacan. We grew those.
Oh my gosh, it is so good. So we need to get there. And I'm not just doing this to be an ad for your restaurant, but the point is you flew from kind of one nest to the next. And I wish we had embraced you with open arms. But I think you told me one time, Mollie, what surprised you and caught you off guard was that the protest voices were stronger than the supportive voices. Is that right?
Yes, that. And I did not expect so much pushback on regenerative agriculture. Like even NPR, and I know NPR is like a shill for whatever, but I didn't expect like mainstream media voices to like attack what I was doing and to question the validity of regenerative agriculture. I thought that there was like an agreement that regenerative agriculture was better than factory farming. And that there was an agreement that not everybody was going to be vegan in the world, and that the idea that we were all just going to eat impossible meat, like that was not going to happen. And so but for when, NPR put out an article, they asked me for comment. I commented. They said I didn't comment in time. It's not true. I commented in time. And they tried to have me not comment in time because they asked for comment at 7 p.m. the night before. And they said I needed to have had comment by 8 a.m. the next morning. And I got it in by 9 a.m. the next morning. But regardless, they didn't put it out for days. But
the window was very small. But so their article was attacking?
Was saying that regenerative agriculture is unproven and the best way to be good for the environment is to not eat meat or to eat less meat. And so my argument to NPR is, let's say hypothetically, let's just like embrace the hypothetical that eating less meat is necessary for everybody to eat regenerative. And I'm not sure I don't agree with that. I think that the math is wrong on that. But let's say that we agree let's just take that fact to be true. Then it should be eat less meat and eat regenerative meat when you are eating meat. So Sage is giving an opportunity for you to have that high quality, wild caught or regeneratively raised local meat. Those are the better options. And we want you to eat less meat. Let's say that's their stance. But that's not what they said. They said regenerative agriculture is unproven. If drought comes, if the land changes hands and someone changes their practices, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, I just have a question. Do people think that a windmill lasts forever? Like it's never going to break down? Or what about a solar panel? Should we never do another solar panel because it doesn't last forever or it could get cracked by a hailstorm? Like, yes, if there's drought, we're going to have more carbon go out. That's all obvious. And this is the best way to fight against drought, sequester water, all blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so I was shocked that there's so much pushback. Regenerative agriculture is greenwashing. It's not real. There's no evidence for it. I mean, people just attacking me saying that I'm just want to make money. I want to slit animals' throats to make more money. That's all I care
You've
about.
Got blood on your hands. I think I saw some of the vitriol. Yes, I saw it on social media. So it wasn't just this article. It was actually, I guess, your former restaurant clients, right? They came around and started protesting and whatnot. That must have been a nightmare.
And then also, but on digital protesting, marking it as permanently closed on Google Maps and Apple Maps over and over again until those reflected that I was permanently closed, going to Yelp and saying it's a new restaurant, even though it's not a new restaurant. We kept the name, we kept everything. erasing all of my thousands of 5-star reviews over the 13 years that I've been in business. And then much easier for them to shift it to a 1 and 2 and 3 stars, getting the 2.5-star reviews, because now they can just post bad reviews and I don't have a lot of other reviews to counterbalance it. With my history and thousands of 5-star reviews, they didn't have the power to do that. But so they petitioned Yelp, and I petitioned back and got my account back. And then they petitioned Yelp again. And the second time Yelp is saying that the public is responding and saying it's not the same restaurant. And I'm literally like this, the public, like same employees, same owners, same partners, same LLC, same location. I just added meat and still 70% vegan options.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
But here's the thing, they may win. We are struggling, and I had to borrow money to pay payroll a couple weeks ago, and we are struggling. But it will be the saddest win for the vegans. If they win this and they prove, what happens is a VC firm comes in with a chicken spot, a sushi spot, Mexican spot, whatever it is, Brazilian barbecue, and it's just going to be meat coming out of the consolidated feedlot system with no commitment to the environment, with no commitment to anything. And that's what comes in my place.
That's such a good point, Mollie. I'd never thought about that before.
Saddest win for the vegans ever. And they said, they got interviewed and they said that they believe that I'm small enough and weak enough that they could beat me, which then will give pause to any bigger vegan chains that would think about doing this because they feel like, they have deeper pockets and could last longer and make the change. And so they said that out loud. They said that this is what they do with the fur too. When a small company uses fur, they battle them, and then the bigger companies give up because they're like, oh, they put those people out of business. So that's their strategy and they're committed to it. So if you live in the Los Angeles area, sorry to be like an advertisement for myself, please support.
Yeah. So I have an idea on this already, but why wouldn't you, I'm not trying to plant a seed, but why wouldn't you just go back and be like, okay, you guys are right. I'm taking meat off the menu.
We weren't surviving after the pandemic anyways. California is broken. The pieces no longer fit together. And this is not really a wise tradition subject. It's more of a over-regulation is not working. I moved out of California and started this ranch, Sovereignty Ranch in Texas, because I could see the writing on the wall. So the restaurants were already struggling from this super abundant pre-pandemic situation, and 10 years with year-over-year growth, quarter-over-quarter growth, very hard to do in California, very hard to do in the restaurant industry, to not being able to survive. And people say, oh, well, you're just a bad operator. Sure. Apparently I just became a bad operator through the pandemic, and I was an excellent operator up until then. And now I'm a terrible operator. I'm okay with that. That's like, blame me. But I would say that when a community works, people can live in a neighborhood and they can have a job nearby, and that job can pay them enough to pay the rent in that nearby, and they can have a little extra to go on vacation and da-da-da-da. That's how the money slave system works. Well, the money slave system is broken in California because you can't live in my neighborhood where my restaurants are and work at my restaurant and still have enough money to even put gas in your car. The only people that live in the neighborhoods where my restaurant are that they live multi-generations in the same household. And that's fine. I live multi-generations in the same household, but I'm just saying the pieces of California don't fit together anymore, and people don't have as much expendable income. And how could they? Gas is $6 a gallon. Rent was raised multiple times through the pandemic. Minimum wage was raised multiple times through the pandemic. And I'm not saying minimum wage shouldn't be raised, but I'm saying if you just arbitrarily move the lever on one thing, it pushes everything else up. And so you imagine like when you're recording music and all the levers move together, we can't just think you move the minimum wage lever and now all those people have enough money to pay for stuff, because that pushes everything up exponentially in the thing. So we were already having a hard time with guest flow post-pandemic. And secondly, I didn't make a mistake. I'm someone who wants to tell the truth. And even if that's hard to hear, I didn't make a mistake. Seed oils are detrimental. I can see with my children, like the ones where I was vegan while I was pregnant and the ones that were, I can see differences. And I don't want to speak specifically on a podcast because later they could listen and say what I don't want to specifically say, but I see differences. I see differences in their teeth. I see differences in their cognitive sharpness. I see differences. And so I didn't make a mistake. Seed oils are bad for you. We never used any of those ultra processed meats. I never have. I never, ever. I've always been a whole food restaurant, but we did use rice bran oil in the fryer because at the time that I opened my restaurant 13 years ago, I was told pretty widespread information that rice bran oil had the highest flash point. It doesn't hydrogenate, blah, blah, blah. It's the best for you. And that was widely agreed upon at the time that I opened my restaurants 13 years ago, unfortunately. So those things, I know I didn't make a mistake. I know that selling people rice bran oil for 13 years is a mistake, not telling people that tallow is better for them.
Coming up, Mollie explains the raw milk situation in Texas. You can't sell it at farmers markets or in restaurants or even wholesale anywhere. And she talks about what she's doing to get raw milk nonetheless to her community, despite the hurdle.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast from the Weston A. Price Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
Optimal Carnivore. Organ meats are some of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. But the guys over at Optimal Carnivore know that they're not always easy to source and they can be tricky to prepare. This is why they started sourcing 100% grass-fed organ meats, high-quality organ meats from New Zealand. They freeze-dry the organs and encapsulate them into convenient bovine gelatin capsules. They chose New Zealand because it is a pure source, a pristine land with rich soil, lush greenery, and one of the cleanest environments on Earth. And their products are 100% grass-fed and grass-finished and free of hormones, pesticides, antibiotics, and GMOs. And since the guys at Optimal Carnivore know that our ancestors would have eaten the whole animal, nose to tail, they've created a unique blend of 9 different organs. It's a powerful combination including beef liver, brain, thymus, heart, kidney, spleen, pancreas, lung, and gallbladder. It's a real nose to tail solution. And each organ contains its own specific unique benefits and nutritional profile. And it provides a large range of nutrients that support all of our major organs and glands. Optimal Carnivore believes that everyone deserves easy access to the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet, which is why they are offering these capsules. They're perfect for people on the go who are simply trying to acquire a taste for organ meats. And Optimal Carnivore plants 1 tree for every product sold. You can get their grass-fed organ complex, their grass-fed bone marrow, their grass-fed liver, and their brain nourish product. Go to amazon.com/optimalcarnivore and check out all of their products and use the code WESTON10 at checkout to save 10% on your purchase. Again, that's amazon.com/optimalcarnivore and the code WESTON10 to save 10% on all products. And gray toad tallow. A lot of us are often on the lookout for products that truly nourish our skin, that begin with the finest ingredients. That's exactly what Gray Toad Tallow has to offer. They source only the best 100% natural tallow from organically raised animals. The result is a pristine product with just a few ingredients, reminiscent of what past generations would use for healthy skin. They also strive to keep their wholesome products affordable, making it more accessible for all of us seeking natural skincare solutions. And hey, life is busy, so we can let Gray Toad Tallow do the work for us, creating a tallow balm that your skin will love. Cherished for generations, tallow naturally offers a perfect blend of fats and vitamins to keep your skin healthy, hydrated, and radiant. So go to graytoadtallow.com to explore their full range of products designed to nurture your skin from head to toe. And use the code WISE10 at checkout to save 10% on your order. Again, that's graytoadtallow.com and the code WISE10 at checkout to save 10%. And experience the difference that Gray Toad Tallow can make. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions.
I want to back up now and talk a little bit about raw milk, which you mentioned at the top. So on your ranch, Do you source enough raw milk only for your family sovereignty ranch, or are you sourcing enough to sell? And is that even legal in Texas?
So in Texas, you could get a grade A dairy permit for raw milk direct to consumer from the farm. So it makes it hard on the consumer. They have to come to the farm, or it can be delivered to a specific spot, but they have to have paid in advance at the farm. So they have to either call, or on the internet, it has to be charged and paid at the farm. I cannot bring milk to the farmer's market and sell it. I cannot. And there's no way that any restaurant, there's no wholesale. You can't sell raw milk at a restaurant. You can't sell raw milk wholesale in any way, shape, or form. So, and cheeses that are over 120 days, I think can be raw and can be sold in retail stores and stuff like that. So we're in the process of building our grade A requirements in our milk room. So currently we're just milking for the family, and we have about 4 cows in milk right now. One has a really big calf on her, and we share for the first several months. And so we're not getting much from her. And then 1 cow's about to calf. So we have enough right now for the family and for cheese and stuff like that for us. But we have 40 cows, and a bunch of them are bred. So we're rushing to get our milk permit in time for us to have all these cows. And so we have Jerseys and Brown Swiss and Guernseys, and we will be selling raw milk to our community here in Texas. And our ranch in Texas is a hospitality ranch. So you can stay, we do retreats, we do weddings, we do family reunions, anything. And then we have a restaurant on farm that only serves meat from the farm. So it's like lamb, pork, and beef from the land, and then vegetables and everything from the land.
Now, I imagine you're not getting protesters there because it's like no one's had anything taken away from them. Plus, it's Texas, right?
Nobody had anything taken away from them. Nobody's mad. It's funny, though, I did call this lady that was in Dallas the other day to tell her about us as a filming location. And she was like, I know you. And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, I'm a vegan and I eat at your restaurant in LA. And I was like, oh, great. They're not going to book any filming.
Oh, gosh.
But she was like, no, I live in Texas. I can't be mad. Anyways, I thought that was funny. But yes, so nobody's upset here. And we're just getting off the ground here. It's a brand new business. And so, but people are super excited because here there's no local produce, local meat. Like people just sell their cows to the to the auction, and then people stock them and then harvest them somewhere far away. And so people are super grateful to be able to get, local lamb or local pork or local beef. And yeah, so if you're in the San Antonio area, we're close by, and we also have, lots of farm produce. And so those things, our community here is like super excited because there's a missing of this high quality food. In California, we're a little spoiled with how much high quality food we can have. So we can turn our nose up like, those people are serving meat and they didn't used to. So forget them and their regenerative American farmed.
So Mollie, you said your husband is originally from Oaxaca. How has his food traditions and food inclinations, how has that shaped where you're at today?
Well, the restaurant Sage, you can see in the menu, there's a lot of Italian influence from my family and a lot of Mexican influence from his family. And it's a beautiful blending of those traditions. And, through my transition of coming from the indoctrinated vegan position, being married to someone who ate a very traditional indigenous diet. There was no road to his village until 1991. And so I remember one time asking him, like, well, what did you eat as a kid? And when we were first married, and he said turtle eggs. And I was appalled at turtle eggs, but because they're endangered and blah, blah, blah. And that's my very privileged mindset from growing up in America where there was plenty of food and I could be a vegetarian and eat what I wanted. And he said, honey, you just don't understand. Like, how much survival do you have to be in to send your children past armed guards with AR-15s in the middle of the night to collect turtle eggs for your family because it's a staple indigenous food that we've been living on forever? He said, you just don't understand because you've had so much. And so not just are his traditions impacting our menu at the restaurant, but it impacts how we utilize everything, how we bring the cow heads home when we bring cows to the USDA facility to be harvested. We bring the heads home and we bring all the bones home and we bring everything home, the oxtails and the whatever, so that we can utilize everything from that nose to that tail and make sure that we're honoring that being, because he comes from a place where there wasn't enough. And dried fish, turtle eggs, and corn were and lard are the foundation of his indigenous diet.
Have you all gone back to Oaxaca? Have you been to his?
I was here. You can see. When we got married, we did it in the indigenous way.
Oh, beautiful.
In his the Itzca, he's Zapotec, and that kind of embroidery is called Itzca. And there's different kinds of embroidery. The first dress I wanted to buy, he was yeah, that's just not the thing. And I was what do you mean? It's really beautiful. He's yeah, it's some other tribe's style. And I was oh. So anyways, but we did it. And but we've gone back a fair amount. And I remember the first time we had our wedding, the night before the wedding, we did a dinner at his mother's house. And I use the term house lightly as to what Americans think a house is. This is 4 concrete walls, a thatch roof with an overhang, with an outdoor kitchen in the porch area with a wood fire, masonry stove. And so she was very nervous. 60 Americans were coming to her house for dinner. And I remember live streaming part of it on Instagram and people going, are they making an all vegan dinner for you? And I remember thinking at that moment, could you imagine? I went to this village and then I asked for this woman to make a vegan meal for 60 Americans. She was already so nervous for making it. And she did make potato and zucchini and tomato tamales for me, which I imagine probably still had lard in them, but I didn't have. But I remember thinking, wow, people think their life, how it is in America, is how it is everywhere. Meanwhile, she was running around, borrowing chickens from neighbors' yards and fish from the ocean, trying to get together enough food for 60 people. And when she makes tamales, the bones and everything of the chickens are inside the tamales. You have to eat off the little bits and spit the bones back out. We would never have bones in our tamales here, right? And so people just don't realize how lucky we are to have such abundance. And so he's helped me see in so many ways, because I did grow up in America, and I did grow up with, even though we were very poor, being very poor in America is very different than being very poor in Juan Malula, Santa Maria, Oaxaca.
I imagine so. And you probably, correct me if I'm wrong, Mollie, but it seems to me that the people who are at an economic disadvantage in the U.S. often have some kind of safety net so that they're not going hungry. But the food that they're given at pantries and so forth, or the government issued food, is all canned and packaged and with a long shelf life, but it's not really very nutrient dense, is it?
No. And we talk about food privilege a lot. We talk about who's getting what and who has access. And often regenerative food, organic food, raw milk are looked at as a privilege. And for sure they are. But I also think cheap food that other people are dying to produce for you is also a cost, and it's a privilege to have access to that cheap food. And then there's a cost associated with our own health. And so we're going to pay now or pay later. And in a culture where we live on credit, my house has a mortgage, my car has a payment, we are willing to pay later. We are not a culture of pay now and be free and clear later. And that is readily available to see in our food system. We are willing to take cheap food now and pay the cost later, but none of us are truly present to the cost of our food. I often use the example of Sonia. She used to clean my house. She was on a team of 5 or 6 women that picked strawberries and the fungicides and everything with that. And out of the 5 or 6 women, only one of them had not had cancer before the age of 45. So that is telling you that intense exposure to those, I think, mostly fungicides to make sure that the strawberries don't mold is causing disease. And so you could say, I can't afford that $4.80 strawberry, so I'm going to buy the $2.99 strawberry. But so for that $1.40, the cost on your body, but also Sonia and her girlfriends all had cancer, are part of the cost of that. And we don't always see that because of many migrant workers come here, are highly exposed to pesticides and fungicides and herbicides, and then return home to their countries of origin. And so the sickness gets exported. And we have plenty of sickness here. I'm not saying all the sickness is exported, but I'm saying that direct contact sickness, a lot of it is exported with farm workers. I feel passionate about less suffering in our food system. And as a chef, I put so much love into my food, right? And so from the store or whatever to the stove and to the table, so much love is in that food. But my thought is that we want that much love in the food from the seed until the store. And that's the breakdown. Mothers, we really want to feed our children the best thing, but we are only considering from the store to the child's plate or to the husband's plate. And we need to start considering from the seed or from the calving or from the lambing to the plate, because there's suffering that is immense happening in that space. And so no matter how much love we pour over it, we can uplift it a little bit with the love we pour over it. For I believe in that energetically, praying over our food, we can uplift it a little bit. But I'm not sure if we're powerful enough prayers to completely eliminate the effects of all of those poisons.
Yes. And a friend of mine said recently, that's something we miss also when we take supplements, because when we take supplements, we are so disconnected from where that, even if it's a whole food supplement, where that beef organ was sourced. We don't know the hands that touched it. We don't know the process that it went through. And so there's something about reconnecting. We're kind of losing the value of that as well, which I think is what you're getting at.
I agree. And I think that many supplements have weird things in them. And we switch to a world of, oh yeah, we don't get enough nutrients, so let's just add it in with a supplement. And the truth for me is, at least, I found very little supplements to make me feel much different. I've heard a lot of amazing stories, but I've not found that magic pill. For me, drinking enough water, getting sunlight, moving my body, getting off of the blue light screens, and eating whole foods, I don't find anything. I do like Shilajit, and it's expensive, and so I don't always keep up with it. And I'm like, is it worth $100 to buy another bottle? But I mostly like that because I make like an afternoon latte, and I've stopped drinking caffeine in the afternoon. So it's more about the ritual, I think.
Yes, yes.
Anything else, but I haven't found a magic wand supplement that I've said, wow, that I'm feeling so much better with that, as the same as it is with food. For me, it's obvious. If I go out and my kids and my husband convince me to eat some Roundup laden pizza, I feel bad afterwards. Like, I'm clear, like, oh, that was really clear. I haven't found a supplement that makes the opposite of that, where I'm like, oh, I took that and I'm just on cloud 9 today.
I'm golden. It's really more the cumulative effect, I think, of all the things you were describing, the nourishing food, the sunshine, the connection with your family and farm, and all those things, I think, that are like that pill, only they take work, right? And they take investment of intention and energy and love. Now, Mollie, we are about to wrap up, so I want to pose to you the question I love to pose at the end, though I feel like we could talk all day, which is so fun. But if the listener could just do one thing to improve their health, if they could just take one step in the right direction for leaning into those wise traditions we've been describing, what would you recommend that they do?
For their health, or like the whole health?
No, their personal health, I would say. But maybe it's related.
So I would say for your own personal health, eating foods in their whole form, or as close to their whole form as possible. And I often say, if you couldn't do the process in your kitchen, it doesn't mean that you have to make every single flour, grinding your own flour, blah, blah, blah. But whole foods in the way that they were meant to be eaten. So that also means maybe fermented and not pitch yeast and stuff like that. So that's what I would say is like, if you can't, when you're looking at ingredients, you can't imagine it growing in your grandmother's garden, or this product, you don't think, I'm not sure I could make this graham cracker in my kitchen at home, then I would recommend that we don't eat that. So that way I say, but I also say that we have to eat of the soil. That we talked about raw milk being 94%, but healthy soil is 70% compatible with the human microbiology in the gut. And so I often speak about that is God inside of us. We are a soul housed in this skin bag, and that skin bag is kept alive by microbiology, and we're meant to eat of the soil, and our food is so disconnected. So the closer those ingredients could be from the farm, eating the milk, drinking milk that's raw, eating food that did not get HPPT or dipped in sanitizer, and eating those foods with that microbiology, that's the way we're meant to eat. And that is what builds health over time. It's your microbiology is like a collection of everywhere you've been and everywhere you go. And if you only stay in industrial spaces, you'll have an industrial microbiome.
Ooh, powerful words to end on. Mollie, thank you so much for this conversation on behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
Our guest today was Mollie Engelhart. You can visit her website, sovereigntyranch.com, to learn more. And I'm Hilda Labrada Gore, the host and producer of this podcast on behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation. You can find me at holistichilda.com. And for the show's transcript today, visit our website, westonaprice.org, and click on the podcast page. And now for a podcast review from midwife Melissa on Apple Podcasts. She said, loving this podcast. Wise Traditions enlightens with timeless health wisdom, blending traditional knowledge with modern insights. Each episode feels like a clarifying guide through the world of wellness, offering practical, life-enriching advice. It's a must-listen for anyone seeking a balanced, informed lifestyle. Melissa, thank you so much for that review. It means a lot. You too can go to Apple Podcasts, click on ratings and reviews, give us a bunch of stars, and tell people why they should listen to the show. These reviews really make a difference, and we can use more of them. And thank you so much for listening, my friend. Stay well, and remember to keep your feet on the ground and your face to the sun.
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit westonaprice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.